Good afternoon, and welcome to the Michigan State University Center for Interdisciplinarity Visiting Faculty Colloquium for the 10th of February, 2022. This is an event that's hosted by Michigan State University, and so we like to begin with the Msu Land Acknowledgement. Michigan State University occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwe, Adawa, and Potawatomi peoples. In particular, the university resides on land ceded in the 1819 Treaty of Saginaw. We recognize Michigan's 12 federally recognized Native nations, historic Indigenous communities in Michigan, Indigenous individuals and communities who live here now, and those who were forcibly removed from their homelands. In offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty, history, and experiences. If you're interested in learning more about land acknowledgements in general or about Michigan State's in particular, you can look at a couple of links that I'll drop in the chat here after I complete my introduction. For those of you who are new to C4I or Center for Interdisciplinarity event, the MSU Center for Interdisciplinarity is a research and outreach center based in the College of Arts and Letters at Michigan State University. We conduct research on cross-disciplinary process and use what we learn through these research efforts to inform our facilitation efforts. So we work to facilitate cross-disciplinary research and make this very difficult mode of research practice more efficient and effective. And data that we collect when we facilitate those efforts are then inputs into our ongoing research. So we have this feedback loop that drives the work of C4I. And one mode of cross-disciplinary facilitation involves hosting events and lectures that inform the practice of interdisciplinarity. Another involves hosting experts as visiting fellows who can enhance our understanding of how cross-disciplinary research and practice function. Today, we're pleased to be hosting an event at the intersection of these two modes, a lecture by C4I visiting fellow, Dr. Veronica Stanich. In different times, we would be hosting her on campus at Michigan State, but we're happy to be hosting her today virtually. And also again, next week virtually when she joins with colleagues Margot Greenlee from margotgreenlee.com and A2RU and Martina Durant from the University of Michigan to deliver a C4I masterclass. That masterclass will be on Thursday, February 17th from 2 to 4 in the afternoon on Zoom. The class is entitled Using the Arts to Flip Understanding, and Margot Greenlee will be the lead facilitator. Today, though, we have our visiting fellow, Dr. Veronica Stanich, with us. Dr. Stanich is the research program manager at the Alliance for the Arts in Research Universities, or A2RU. Dr. Stanich holds a PhD in dance studies from the Ohio State University. Her work on the A2RU research team has resulted in workshops, white papers, and other resources exploring arts integration impacts, issues around tenure and promotion for arts and interdisciplinary faculty, and interdisciplinary collaboration. Dr. Stanich is the managing editor of Groundworks, A2RU's online platform for arts integrated research. Dr. Stanich is with us today to deliver the presentation, Mapping and Exploring Impacts of the Arts in Higher Education. Dr. Stanich.
Hi, I'm Veronica Stanich. I'm the research program manager at A2RU, the Alliance for the Arts in Research Universities. I'm a middle-aged white woman. I have dishwater blonde hair. I'm wearing a dotted blouse and a black cardigan, and I'm standing in my basement here in Michigan. Thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you especially to Michael O'Rourke and the Center for Interdisciplinarity for inviting me. Today, I want to talk about how A2RU researches the impacts of the arts in universities. I want to dig into a map of impacts that A2RU made to look at what it is and how it came to be. And then I want to explore one particular aspect of that map and its implications for action. So rather than a long talk with a Q&A afterward, I thought maybe I would give shorter spurts of talk and we would break it up for time for discussion. And of course, I'm happy to take questions then, but I also have some questions for you. And I look forward to hearing your perspective on the work we've been doing. In those discussion settings, I'm in favor of actually talking. So I'll ask that you use the raise hand function. It's under reactions on that bottom toolbar on your Zoom window. And once you've raised your hand, you can just unmute and we'll talk. Of course, you are welcome to use the chat too, especially for immediate things that are happening during the presentation. I am incapable of both presenting and looking at the chat. So I've asked Michael if something especially topical and juicy is happening in the chat, if he would please just interrupt me, say, hey, everybody's talking about this in the chat, and then we can talk about it together too, because I really can't look at the chat at the same time. So a bit more about Zoom. Please feel free to turn your camera off while we're together. And please also, I warmly invite you to turn it on. That's just selfish. It's really nice for me to look out and see faces and see who I'm talking to. So thank you. If we were together, this would be an opportunity for you to connect to other people. We'd be in a room together and you could see who else is here. So I suggest we simulate that and you take time to go look at the participants list. Send a direct message to someone you haven't seen in a while and you'd like to reconnect, or message a person whose work you admire and tell them, see if we can find a time to talk. I'm going to share my screen now with my little slide presentation. And there we go. Okay, so as I mentioned, I am the research program manager at A2RU, the Alliance for the Arts in Research Universities. And A2RU is a network of institutions of higher education that are committed to integrating the arts into the fabric of the university. It's also a physical office. We are with a staff and we're at the University of Michigan. So we talk about arts integration. We throw that term around, and it's not necessarily widely accepted or understood by everyone. So part of my role as research program manager is to articulate what is arts integration and how do we do it effectively and why does it matter. So in terms of the what, when we're talking about having the arts be really woven into the fabric of the university, I thought today maybe instead of trying to come up with an abstract definition of that, I'd give some examples instead. So when we look at campuses where we see the arts integrated into their culture, one of the things we see is that arts experiences are available to all students, regardless of their major. So that might be classes. It might be access to arts spaces and resources like studios, or it might be supporting student-led arts groups. We also see high-level communication that celebrates the arts. So that's the provost or the president even speaking internally to the campus or externally and recognizing arts accomplishments in the same way that academic or athletic accomplishments are celebrated. On campuses where the arts are well integrated, we see equitable tenure and promotion processes for faculty in the arts. So they face some of the same T&P challenges, have the same universe of concerns as faculty doing research in community engaged or engaged scholarly arenas. So we see that there's multiple or diverse types of scholarship recognized in those institutions. And finally, we see interdisciplinary teaching and research that includes the arts. So that might be classes that are co-taught with faculty members from different schools and colleges, including the arts, or it might be research teams that are interdisciplinary and artists are on them. So those are some examples of how we see the arts integrated into campus. And I promised an articulation of what, how, and why, but we're going to skip how for today. That's a different presentation and go right to why. And as soon as we start talking about why, we almost go straight to impacts, to wanting to say, why are the arts valuable? Why do they matter? Why should we care and promote them and give money to them and give resources to them? And for the people who are involved with A2RU, many of them find themselves in case-making situations where they have to make the case for the arts on their campus. And for them, it's of vital interest to know, how do we articulate those impacts so that they can speak up a hierarchy or a chain of control or power to the impacts of the arts on campus. So from 2012 to 2015, A2RU conducted a massive interview cycle. It was funded by the Mellon Foundation, and it involved hundreds of faculty, leaders, staff, and students at 38 research universities. There were 50 questions, and they asked about all aspects of the arts. They engaged faculty from different disciplines. I'm sorry, that was on the previous slide. I'll go back for a sec. Maybe it's on the next slide. It'll be on a future slide, I promise. It engaged faculty from all different disciplines who are involved in the arts in some way. And we refer to these as the SPARK interviews just because of the acronym. So we had this massive data set, all this interview data that had been cleaned and parsed and scraped and prepared for analysis. And Gabriel Harp, who was the, and I'm once again ahead of myself, sorry for skipping around, going back. Gabriel Harp, who was the director of research at HRU at the time, was, for example, working on just two of the questions: what is research and what is arts research? And there were other questions that were in the mix, but for those, he had researchers who were using probabilistic topic modeling, machine-assisted reading and categorization, and the result was these two really great reports, which I can link at the end of this presentation, by those titles: what is research and what is arts research? So we had those and other questions under analysis, but there was a real desire to get the impacts questions analyzed to see how we could talk about impacts of the arts in the university. So I was hired in 2017 to start manually coding interview responses regarding impacts. And there were two questions in the interview cycle that touched on impacts. Q25 asked broadly, what impact did you hope to see? What impacts did you actually see? And how did you measure it? And then Q26 asked specifically about teaching and research, about how the arts impacted teaching and research. So notice a couple of things about this data we're working with. First of all, we have a broad question and we have a specific question, and the only specific question asks about teaching and research. So naturally that affects the makeup of the total data set. We have a lot of responses that speak to teaching and research. And then notice that the wording of question 25 is challenging. All in one breath, it asks, what impact did you hope to see and what did you actually see? It asks about measurement too, and we'll get to that later. But the first challenge is this conflation of aspirational and actual impacts. And in fact, very few of the interview respondents methodically separated out, we hoped to see this and we actually saw that. Instead, they got excited about what they were talking about and just started talking about programming and all the impacts they were seeing or maybe hoped to see. And in fact, it was sometimes difficult to even infer whether the impacts they were talking about were actually happening or part of the plans. So with that kind of jumbling, we asked ourselves, what could we hope to get out of this? And we answered ourselves, we could hope to get a landscape of potential impacts, of things that might be possible, of impacts that might be possible with the arts in higher ed. So going through these 212 responses to those two questions, I started to pull out the impacts anytime people spoke about an impact. And as those numbers mounted, as you get more than 10 or 20, pretty soon it becomes hard cognitively to keep track of all the different types of things that are being said, and you start to categorize them. So you start to put like with like, and oh, this is a sort of thematic thing that people address without wanting to be too reductive. You could lump them together. And sometimes those categories become super categories that include a lot more. So recall that we had a lot of different people responding from different disciplines and in different roles. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of the types of impacts and types of categories of impacts we came up with or discerned in their responses. And you'll see how they really differ. One of the biggest super categories was the one we called promotes new understanding, perspective, and awareness. And we heard this from faculty who said their students understood course content differently through the arts, from researchers who worked with other researchers in the arts and then came to understand their own work differently, from surveys of attendance at art galleries. So that was a big one. People understand things differently. We found reports of a sort of heightened or strengthened community around the arts. And that might look like the music majors in a particular program who form a really tight-knit community and even keep in touch after graduation and help each other network and find jobs. That might look like a campus film festival that brings people from the town onto campus to see the films. We saw an impact of opportunities after graduation. This could be within the arts fields or beyond them. We saw, oh, because of our arts programming, our students get into great arts jobs, they get into grad school programs, and sometimes they get into programs that have nothing to do with the arts, that because this student applying for medical school leaned in his application on his exposure to Leonardo da Vinci, it made his application stand out. This fourth impact starts to get at what I mentioned before, that the respondents to these interviews questions sometimes had a different sense from each other of what the word impact might mean. So the first three bullets speak to something or someone being influenced because of their exposure to their arts. And that fourth bullet thinks about impact more in the way of when we talk about like a citation index. What's your impact? Well, we got this many awards. We got mentioned on local news. The president cites us when he talks about our campus. So that is a different sort of impact where you're talking about recognition or an award or prestige. There were instances of the arts generating excitement. Students, this course fills up almost as soon as it's listed in the catalog. Everybody loves this course, it's great. People got really excited about the work we were showing and wanted to see more, those sorts of responses. And there you see two different counts there for how many times it showed up. It's because of a different way they were categorized. We saw a couple instances of the arts being linked to innovation, to some new and novel thinking. And that final bullet point you see, promotes resilience, is not a category, it's a single impact. One person mentioned it once, that the students, that art students really can deal with failure. They get resilient and they can, it helps them persevere. And that, we put it in a high level category of, I think we called it student skills and capacities. But it's a really tricky one because it really begs the question of evidence. We didn't have any observation to sort of triangulate the impacts that people reported in their interviews. We had to take them at their word. If you say it promotes resilience, it does. It gets at questions of evidence for all sorts of arts impact on learning. And it returns us pretty quickly to the idea of measurement. Remember, that was a little piece in the Q25. What did you do? What did you hope to do? And how did you measure it? In a few cases, people were able to cite a formalized study they had done, that there was a study that was designed and implemented to track the impacts of their work, but that was pretty rare. More common was some surveying being done of attendees at an exhibit or student evaluations of instruction in which they could get some sense of first-person account, how many people like this, how many people were affected by it, and in what ways. There was a lot of avoidance where people just didn't address the measurement part of the question at all. Some people said they regret they didn't measure it. They asked for tools. How might we measure it? I don't know how to measure it. I don't have the resources to measure it. How do you go about doing that? And some people apologized for the fact that they only had anecdotal evidence. And that brings me to my first discussion point, where I'm going to stop sharing the slides and invite us to have a conversation together about the idea of measuring impact in this context. So measurement with its numbers and metrics is really a nice standard for evidence. In fact, to boost my credibility with you, I showed you slides straight off that demonstrate I counted things. So you could take me seriously. I have percentages and counts. And in some ways, this might not be a good fit for talking about what the arts do. You can get at the percentage of people who say they saw the exhibit, or how many people it reached, or how many students gave the instructor high marks. But I don't know that it gets at the type of intrinsic impact of the arts that we're really trying to find out about. It gets at a what happened there, but not a how did it happen? And for that how, I think that maybe stories and pictures get closer to the impacts of the arts. But stories are dismissed as anecdotal evidence. So what about this? Maybe we need to stop talking about measuring impact of the arts and start talking about expressing or describing impact. So in that case, anecdotal evidence would be great. But I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this. How would such an expression of impact resonate in your world? Would it be useful? Would it be dismissed if we relied on storytelling to talk about the impact of the arts? So I haven't been watching the chat, as I said, but I will watch for raised hands. Let's go.
The first one is just a comment from Dan about the resilience outcome. So the resilience outcome is one we think our students are getting from improv because there is so much low stakes failure in improv games. And that offered as an observation on the value of the arts for resilience. Paul writes, outcomes matter. Anecdotes haven't been very effective except as a way to talk about the numbers.
Okay. Well, let me, and I see your hand there, Sean. Let me just quickly respond to the resilience thing and the outcomes thing. The one question about resilience is the question of transference. That is, I've been to a lot of auditions and been turned away. Does that make me resilient in other fields, in other aspects of my life? And probably yes, but that's a point of hesitance. And then to outcomes, it's one thing to tell stories, but I think you mean by I would love to hear more about what you mean by outcomes, that outcomes matter. So if
I can, may I speak?
Yes, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ron, I haven't forgotten you. You're still there. Go ahead, Paul.
So I'll just very quickly. So things like we created this thing called a creative path to college success, which played towards students' affinities and sort of said yes to the things they are and built in quantitative reasoning and critical thinking and writing competencies into those series of courses. And the way we were able to fund it is through retention numbers, that the GPAs were higher, the retention rate was higher. So these are good stories, and we had anecdotes and students can say X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, my supervisors are interested in, did you retain? Did you have students succeed? Those are numbers that speak to it, because economic impact, I think, is a harder thing to quantify, whether it's in ticket sales or dinners out by people, et cetera, things like that. But we accumulate all bit of data points that we can, and then weaving a good story has been always a challenge. But ultimately, it's going to be numbers like that matter.
Right, now I'm with you. Yes, agreed. That the audience matters, like who's hearing your message, and that those numbers matter a lot, especially when it comes to funding and power structures, to be able to say, here is how it succeeds in numbers. Thank you. That's a good clarification. And thank you so much for waiting, Sean. Please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Sean Taylor, and I am the art-based research engineer at the University of Maine. I blend engineering and art, science, and all the other new media things. And we have labs based around providing services for students and local community members. So my question for you is, I have a lot of trouble representing the qualitative value of what we do to an administration who's highly focused on business, logistics, engineering, and quantitative analysis. So I haven't figured out how to bridge the gap, because we have excitement, wonder, all these amazing things happening when I teach engineers art. But I can't seem to get that excitement going up the chain so that we can get more funding, more value seen. So I just kind of wanted to hear other stories about some of that, maybe from the crowd and from yourself, about how we can make ourselves seen in a qualitative way.
That's an excellent point. And I think Emily Ryan is here. I learned so much from her in Red Hat Research and talking to different audiences. And it speaks exactly to what Paul was talking about. It's helpful to have the numbers for the what and the storytelling for the how, so that you can fill in some of that at a loss for words, qualitative aspect of it. And I think it also involves a little bit of gentle education to let people, to start them with what they know. This is numbers, this is money, this is butts in seats. And now that we've got that established, look at what else is going on in the arts. Does that ring true for anyone else, or what would you add as advice to Sean, or storytelling to Sean?
Don't be scared, I don't bite.
And now I'm trying to read the chat at the same time.
I can go ahead and do that. There's a couple of comments that I think Paul sort of echoes what you said and says gentle but relentless communication. Above, Emily asks this question. I think there's also the question of whether people are asking about impact beyond return on investment, right? So expanding out what counts as impact.
I'm happy to speak to that more, but I also just wanted to respond to Sean a little bit too, because I think one thing that is helpful, and I certainly don't have all the answers, I think it's a great question, is also to be continuously, receptive, obviously listening to what language is being spoken in different realms, but also just being adaptable too, so that you're able to continue doing what it is that you know matters. And also, it's more, but also being able to speak the language of the other numbers or whatever, kind of to Veronica's point earlier too. That's a thing that I'm trying, but.
Takahito, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks. I was also wondering, quantifying the impact of the individual learning or outcome is very difficult, but also it might be also important to think about potential influences on the impact. It's not considering about output, but also the input. What kind of the program or experience of the art program will have potential influence on students, which will lead to the outcome of their success or some sort of the visible outcome. So it's a very complicated, but this is a very interesting study to keep hearing from you. Thank you.
Sure, and Emily just reminded me too, thank you, Emily, for your comment, and thank you for your question, Takahito, that it's not just tailoring the message to the listener, but also it involves planning some data gathering that would be as specific as you're describing, Takahito. What is it you're trying to show? Do you need to show how the students improved is it about retention? Is it about the quality of the work they're doing? How are you going to measure it so that you can start to collect the kind of data that makes the point you're trying to make? Sarah Lynn, please go ahead.
Yeah, something that thank you. I was really interested in what you were saying, was something that strikes me in the arts when we are for a loss of words or for a loss of numbers or for a loss of metrics that are transferable, that are legible. We fall into what I consider to be perfectly appropriate language, like powerful, compelling, memorable, expansive. And we stop there. And we let that sit in a space alone while we feel it. And it strikes me that there's some kind of connection that we have all been stopping short of in terms of the aesthetic forms of art and how we count it. And, some might call it aesthetic distance, other might call it formalism, some of us might call it structures and disciplines. But it does seem to me that that's the area where the gap needs to be acknowledged as a vast cosmic space that produces knowledge and creativity, like cosmic, that adds a little bit of that magic in. So powerful in what way? Compelling toward what? How we load those words.
I'm going to repeat back to you what I think is my takeaway, and you tell me if I got it right. I'm reminded of teaching dance writing, where I have students who interpret, but I make them back it up with description. What are the aspects of it that made you have this takeaway? And I think that's what you're getting at when you talk about formalism. Could you just say one more bit on that to make sure I understand?
I think you have it, and I think you have a lack in my articulation too, because it's right there. It's there where I think that we have the issue, because I don't want to prescribe the outcome. So I think when Emily was talking about this space, how do we do that without just giving up? saying, well, that's the arts. And I think it may relate something to the research that's gone on between intrinsic and extrinsic reward for artistic activity. So yes, you have my point, which is rather vague.
It's a good one, and it wasn't vague. If I got it, it was there. I see the chat has quieted down, and if people would kind of nod to me, then I'll go back to talking. Is this the time? Is there more?
Let me just, if it's okay, just read
Please.
Carolyn's contribution just to make sure that gets read out.
Good.
I was at a talk recently where researchers were working with youth using a YPAR approach, youth participatory research. They asked youth participants in their program how they wanted to express the impacts of the program. They got some great examples, for instance, comic drawings that were super powerful.
Oh, you just opened a big kettle of fish, Caroline.
Yeah, I feel like I probably can't do a great job of representing this. This isn't my work, but I could throw a paper in the chat if you're interested on this. But I'm an evaluation specialist at Northwestern University. I'm not in an arts space at all. I'm in Center for Quantitative Biology. But I was so taken in by this talk, in part because the authors were really interrogating kind of the, the foundations of the way that we think about what meaningful evaluation data is, what meaningful research is, and the problems with that. And so they were employing this YPAR viewpoint, this mindset, and then tailoring their methods to that. But they said, we really are looking to these youth participants to help us understand what the important questions are and help us to understand what the important evidence is for impacts. And they are the experts on their experience. And so we are working with them. We are facilitating them leading research about their own experiences. And as an evaluator, this was just radical and it was great. And my team and I did a debrief on that. But I love how much it shook up my thinking. And so you were asking a question a minute ago, like, how much do we need to measure this? Or are we looking at impacts that are offered in other ways? Like, are we looking at artistic productions that share the impacts of a program with our audience? And it reminded me of being at this talk. I guess that's all I've got.
It sounds amazing, and it speaks again to that question of audience, that those comics examples, are they going to resonate with the people you have to make a case to, or are they going to resonate over here? It's such a balancing or an orchestration of what you've got to present and to whom you're presenting it. I think seems to be my takeaway from what everyone, starting with Paul, has said. There's so many different ways you could express the impact, and that one seems super amazing. Shall I go on?
Yeah, go ahead. Okay. I think now is a good time.
Okay. So far, what I described in my little story about this impacts research is not atypical for social science methodologies, sort of extracting something, extracting meaning out of a bunch of text and starting to label it and call it something. But what we did next, I didn't learn in any of my qualitative research coursework. So we had all these different impacts that expressed not only different perspectives, but different understandings of what impact means. And we spread them all out on sticky notes on a table. And we just started, I can't think of any other way to say it, but storytelling. Like, where does this start? What's the main thing? It starts here. No, it starts here. And just laying these things out and rearranging them. And coming up with a landscape. I make it sound like a board game, start here and move on, but a landscape of how all these impacts might flow and fit within each other. And then we couldn't stop thinking about it that way. And we hired a graphic designer, Matthias Baden, to sort of render this landscape of ideas visually. And we got what we called an impacts map. And it was a paper map that was quite big. And it had this whole visual grammar on it of how these impacts could be understood and what their relationships might be. Well, then we got an NEA grant to do a 2.0 version of the map. And we incorporated this magnificent data set from the University of Michigan, a 4-year longitudinal study of 4,000 undergraduates speaking to their experience of the arts, and a lit review. And we expanded the map and we made it bigger, and it was now 20 by 30 inches. And I'm going to attempt to show you on my screen, even if I've got the technology right, it's going to be a little frustrating because it is meant to be held so you can look at it all at once rather than having to move around a screen, which is what we're about to do when I share my screen. And again, at the end, I will put a link into the chat about how you could actually obtain some of these paper maps. But I want to show you what I'm talking about so that we can sort of walk through it and it won't be an abstraction. Here we go. Let's see if we can look at this okay. Yeah, that's really small, right? All right. Well, you're getting a little bit of a backed out view, and I'll start talking you through it. So I said what we considered the wellspring, or the place where it starts, is that two things come together. And what they're labeled here is arts and interdisciplinarity. At the top, this divided hexagon that's gold and red. And with 3 years hindsight, I wouldn't have said interdisciplinarity. I would have said arts and other stuff. Arts practices and approaches and methods and outcomes come into contact with other approaches and methods and outcomes. Other ways of understanding what scholarship means, other ways of approaching problems, other ways of teaching and learning. So I would have said the arts come into contact with other approaches and methods. And that the next result, the thing that happens next, is that, well, people who may not have been exposed to the arts become familiar with them, and that these diverse thinkers come together. We start to have a meeting of different perspectives, and they come into conversation. And then we come to these two sort of high-level impacts depicted on the impacts map, the sort of pale green big hex to the left here, and then the darker green one to the right. And the pale green one on the left is promotes new perspectives, understanding, and awareness. And the one on the right is working together. So those we saw as like the big high-level impacts of when the arts are integrated into the university, that people get a new way of understanding. And all these mini light green ones down the side that you probably can't read, and I'm not going to try and enlarge it because I'll screw it up, are some of those smaller impacts that were in there in the super category. Think differently, see familiar problems in an unfamiliar way, have a new understanding. And then the working together side was new thoughts come together, collaboration, things like that. So those are high level impacts we saw across the university. The smaller hexagons that are lined out, stacked up along the side, articulate those smaller or more specific or discrete impacts. And you'll see these red impacts, the red hexes at the bottom of the stack. Those turned up when we did map 2.0, because it really bothered me on the original map that all the impacts were positive. And of course they would be. If you are doing interviews at a university and talking to people about arts integration, the people who show up for the interview are going to have positive things to report. Nobody said there were terrible outcomes and we hate the arts. And it bothered me that there was this imbalance. So when we made the revised version of the map, I went out looking. What are some of the things that go wrong related to new perspectives? Well, some people feel their identity threatened in a research situation where there's another way of looking at things. Some people are offended. It upsets worldviews. And there are, just look at the team science literature, a whole stack of negative impacts when you bring different thinkers together. You have to control for how they don't share values, how there are conflicts if certain things aren't controlled for. There are all sorts of things that can go wrong when difference comes together. And the outcome of all this was a unique way of knowing that's centered in the arts. And then below that, you see this funny little orange thing that has black sticking out on the side, and we blew it up on the side over to the right. And as I mentioned, not all the impacts were of the same type. Some of the impacts people talked about were an influence or an effect on people, but others were this sort of benchmarking. What did we see? What was the impact? Well, people did really good work. Our students are producing very high quality work, or we're getting all these accolades, or people are getting involved and they want to come back. This class always fills up. The work is getting out there. We have more and more people hitting our website. And we saw that as a family of a type of impact, that generates more interest in arts integration. When those things are happening, when it's getting out there and people are getting excited and it's getting attention and the work is good, it attracts more, it builds momentum. So we saw that as kind of a generator or a dynamo that engenders more arts integration. And I'm going to scroll down this map. Then we started tracking impacts on specific areas. So for example, impact on academia, on the university life. And we had a big category for teaching and a big category for research and one for the university itself. And again, this visual grammar of smaller impacts within. And then at the bottom of these stacks, you can see a yellow, green, and a darker green that refers up to those big high level impacts of new perspectives and working together, because they kept turning up in individual areas. We can see that we found how the arts, oh, please don't go away. Okay. Impact individual disciplines that come into contact. Please reload, please. There it is, beautiful. How they impact the other disciplines that come into contact with them. That's this orange area on the right. And again, you see the recurring new perspectives working together plus other impacts. And then over to the left, the impact on students. Once we added in that data set from the University of Michigan longitudinal study, really expanded to include student experience, and also this troublesome idea of skills and capacities related to the arts. And they turned up by the tens, this long stack of light blue little hexes, all the things that people said, okay, I'm going to try and enlarge this a little bit at a time. There, so you can see for students, this arts-based skills and capacities hex. And here are all the things the students were saying that the arts helped them with. Creativity, personal expression, resilience, there it is, patience, abstract thinking, all these things. And we ended up having to do a little book or a report exploring where there was evidence for these things, how exactly those turned up in the interviews, things like that, to help add some dimension or make it clearer what it was we were actually talking about when we claimed that the arts impact abstract thinking. I'm going to stop sharing that screen, and I will put a link in there so that everyone can look at that on their own time. But the reasons we chose to put forth the research in a map form, in this visual piece of paper, we wanted to create a sort of draft taxonomy to give people language to talk about it, again, in this case-making situation. So they could start to say, oh, here's where we're having impact, and refer to something, or show their dean or their provost, the arts are having this influence on student experience, on my teaching. We also wanted to prompt further questions. We thought it would be better to get it in people's hands quickly than to go through a peer review publication process and have a way smaller audience. We wanted people to have the information and to be able to put it up on their office doors, so that as people walk down the hall, they could see the impacts of the arts. We also hoped for a different form of peer review that would come through our constant solicitation. Please let us know what you think. It's on the map everywhere. We've put it out there. We've asked, here's how we got to this. Would you have done it differently? Would you have arranged this differently? What would you take off? What would you add? We haven't had a huge lot of response to that, but I keep putting it out there. How would you do this differently? What do you think? Did we get it wrong? What more do we need to know or take into consideration? So we distributed the map. We always give it out at our conferences. We've distributed it at the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Mathematics at their branches from the same tree events. So we try to get it out into people's hands. It's available for purchase online. And that was our hope, that we would be able to prompt more discussion, or that it would be a jumping off tool, a jumping off place for discussion. And here's another good place to pause. The methods I started talking about are really arts-based. They're interpreting things visually, they're telling a story and laying that story out. And it's obviously different from a peer-reviewed article. So is this valid? We did all this research and then we chose to express it in this kind of eye candy way. But knowing what I've told you about the data and the methods and the outcomes, what do you think about the knowledge that's in that map? And our choice to represent it that way? Is it effective? Would you have done it differently? Does it seem useful, like something you can take and show to people? I'd love to hear your impressions on that map. And while you're thinking about what to say, I will find that link and send it to you or put it in here. And I'm looking in the chat too. Go ahead, Sean.
Thank you again. I didn't want to monopolize in all this time, but I wanted to thank you actually for pointing out all the negative aspects, things that we should watch out for. That's what I experience on a daily basis, trying to show all this stuff. And you know, there's a ton of psychology and socialization and all those other things that, you know, I'm really not that good at. That's why I got my buddy Drew here to help me out with that stuff. But anyway, I thank you for this map. It's what I've been dreaming of doing, and trying to map out all of that stuff. So I think this is going to help us a lot at the IMRC Center here. So thank you very much. Just wanted to say that.
Well, that warms my heart. Thank you. And you should know that the, oh shoot, is it Americans for the Arts? If you Google Wheel of Impacts of the Arts, there's a really great online interactive tool that has a whole bunch of impacts. It's not specific to universities, but it's really useful if you need language for how it can have an economic impact or a such and such impact. But thank you for saying that. And Angela, won't you please unmute and go ahead?
Sure. I love the map. I'm going to order one. It's really great. But I'm a research development professional, and so I work with faculty all over our university, you know, including those in the arts. And but I'm also a PhD student in instructional design. And my question for you is there not a sort of a parallel to grounded theory? I mean, you were talking about, like, is taking your findings and representing them this way, like, is it legitimate? But that's what, I mean, not exactly what you do in a grounded theory, but, you know, you take your findings and you try to tell the story that your data presents. So just offering that.
Well, I appreciate that. And if I'm always so hesitant to say I'm doing grounded theory, because there are specific aspects of it that I'm not, and I don't want anybody to slap my hand and say, that's not what, can't remember the two names, so-and-so and so-and-so call grounded theory. But yes, I guess it is certainly similar in terms of bottom-up theorizing, finding what's there and presenting it in a way. It feels a little more interpretive, but if you see that as a relationship or as a similarity, I'm good with that. Thank you for letting me know that. Go ahead, Takahito.
Yeah, thanks. I really like the map, because it's visually easy for understand for us to know that what are the key concepts you grab from the interview participants. And then I think that this map will help us to know that which direction can institutional leaders can make some decisions to improve the program, or, you know, help student learning or art programs. So I told you this map. Thank you.
You're welcome. And we hoped that it would be one of our resources that people could use just to start as a show and tell. This is what I'm talking about. Here's where we're located. Here's what we're doing. So I'm gratified to hear that it looks useful in those ways, but I'm also really ready to hear how it's not, or what else you might need, or what it could do differently, or what adaptations it would need. I feel like I've got so many smart people in the room. I should talk less and listen more.
There's a comment from Marissa in the chat. Thank you for your work. I think the map is excellent and totally valid. It is a great representation of the information collected and shows the diversity of impacts from the perspective of various stakeholders.
Well, thank you, Marissa. She's a smarty pants at Michigan State. So if she says it works, I feel like, yay, we must have done something right. Good. And thank you for dropping, and I'm trying to read chat and listen. So now I look distracted. Thank you for putting the link in there, and to the Americans for the Arts wheel. And thank you for your comment, Marissa. Anyone else on what you might need the map to do that it doesn't do, or how we might have done it differently? Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, thank you for presenting that. To be honest with you, I've seen the physical form of it before, like it's in huge print form, and I've been a little bit intimidated and not really known where to start in terms of interpreting the data. So having you walk us through it just now was really helpful. So I guess maybe this is not, this is my question. Is there a form of this data that's like a slightly higher level, so that then once we're like, okay, this is what all these hexagons mean, then we can break out into the like color swatches next to them? Do you know what I mean? Like the sort of larger data points and then breaking out more into the smaller ones.
Not exactly.
Okay.
There's the written report that we did to the NEA that just talks about every single one of those. There is in the corner of the map a sort of how to read it. I think it's the upper right corner of how to enter it. But that's interesting that it's so intimidating. You don't really know where to start, that, you know, start big and maybe break it down. But that's interesting. Let me think about how to counteract that.
Yeah, maybe I'm the only one that had that and I was just intimidated, but
I bet not. I bet not. Makes me think about, now I can look at the chat, makes me think about a pop-up book so that each shape reveals more information. Oh, that would be so cool. But then that's more like an interactive thing, isn't it? If a pop-up book would be a really great, okay, let me think about that. That's a great.
And Caroline has a question.
Go ahead, Caroline.
Just a statement, since it seems like you're asking folks, like, how are you reacting to this?
Yeah.
I, just as an alternate perspective, I love that there's so much richness here and there's so much depth. And I feel like this does invite me to engage in a variety of different ways. I can, you know, really sweep it for big ideas and let that sink in. If I want to explore in depth, I can focus in an area. I love the little call outs, the big stories, the about this map and the how to use this. I don't know, I get excited about seeing this much richness, both in terms of knowledge and understanding and questions, but just a visual richness of this. So thank you for the new door art for my office.
You're welcome. And I am so grateful to our graphic designer, who was exceptional in terms of listening and having a dialogue with us about how is this supposed to look, and is this doing what you hoped it would do. So that's a yay, Matthias. Oh,
There's a bit of a conversation about grounded theory in the chat.
I'm
involving
gonna let
Angela
that
and
go.
Emily.
No, I'm gonna let that go. Not gonna touch that one. You guys talk about grounded theory. I am going to jump into the last piece of my talk. I'm going to do one more sweep in case anyone wanted to weigh in on the map. And it doesn't have to be all nice, although I do love to hear praise. But
I guess I'll just say what I said in the chat. I'm sorry about the time crunched audience aspect. That's what I was saying about like not knowing where exactly to begin with all of the data. If I'm trying to present it and I have 30 seconds of someone's time, you know, where the large like high level. That's what I'm saying. Sorry.
No. Now I get it. So that's like you have to be super familiar with the map and know they've only got so much time. I need to talk to them about the teaching and learning impacts or something, that you need to get there faster. I see what that is. Yeah, I haven't solved for that, but I'm getting closer. Thank you. And did Libby have her hand up and I took it down too fast? No.
Okay, there I am. I recently co-taught with the Master of Architecture professor, a research class for thesis students in architecture. And I was teaching the social science research. She was teaching the visual research. And this is the kind of thing I learned about. And I'm so glad to see it coming about, especially in terms of transdisciplinary work. If we're going to do those projects, we certainly should evaluate them in the same way.
Oh, evaluation, but yes, we should. It's that question of measurement and evidence and evaluation that keeps coming up, but yes. I'm going to just blurt out the last third of my formal presentation to make sure we leave plenty of time for talking. I'm going to wrap this up by 3:30. 90 minutes seems like enough time to sit in one place. And the last chunk I want to deliver or present to you moves away from impacts or starts farther away from impacts and ends up over there. So back to my storytelling, we had the map 2.0 done by 2019, and then we kind of put it away and did other stuff. We did a lot about interdisciplinary collaboration, trying to explain the how and the why of that. And I got more involved in the team science community and learned a lot from them about interdisciplinary collaboration. And over the past few years, especially at the most recent team science conferences, I've noticed a lot of presentations on the effectiveness of workshopping, basically, that's grounded in design thinking for science teams that are interdisciplinary. So, and by design thinking, I mean, there's an element of divergent thought where there's a brainstorming, and then there's a convergence where you prioritize or have some measure by which you decide these are the ones we're going to focus on. There's some prototyping, there's some trying it out with users, there's some iterating and drafting. So that sort of workshop, and those are what I just described is the A2RU workshops we offer to. On our a2ru.org page where there are workshops, that's pretty much the structure of them, is based in that kind of design thinking workshop. And so it's super effective. We're all excited about it. And I kept thinking, what's an arts-based workshop? Like A2RU supports the arts and design. There's a design-based workshop. What's an arts-based workshop have to offer to anybody? What does that mean? And so I just kind of walk around and think about that and don't come up with any answers. And at the University of Michigan, we have this informal group that we call the Team Science Roundtable. And Martina, my colleague from the RNA Biomedicine Center on campus here, identifies me as, oh, you're the arts person. Veronica, what do you think about this? Don't you think the arts have something to offer researchers in medicine and science? Don't you think it would just give them a different way to look at things? And I was like, well, maybe, I don't know. I'd like to think it would, that, you know, we could make arts and that would help STEM researchers. I don't have a lick of evidence for that, but sure, yes, I think so. And so I'm sort of, I don't even know the search terms. You know, is there research on this? How do arts methodologies or practices inform, like I didn't even have a search term. And I was talking to an anesthesiologist on campus who is also a researcher and also into the arts. And he was describing a moment where he had all this data accumulated that just wasn't saying what he thought it should say. He felt frustrated by the research. He was like, you know, I was talking to my colleague, what are we going to do with these? This results aren't what we expected. It's not coming out the way, it doesn't demonstrate what we thought it would demonstrate. And then he describes this flip in understanding. And he was like, oh, it's not what we were looking for there. It's the opposite. The fact that we're not getting those results. And he had this sort of aha moment. And he asked me, I bet artists feel that all the time. I'd love to tap into how artists get inspired. And I was like, oh, I do not have a magic bullet on that. Like, talk to all the writer's block people. The arts don't have a lock on inspiration, but it gave me something else to research about what might instigate an aha moment. So I'm reading about creative process and various models for what are the stages. And there's this incubation stage where you aren't really focused on the problem. It's on a back burner, you're doing something else. And in fact, in that incubation period, most of the research says that you're more likely, you're inviting inspiration better if you're doing a simple repetitive task. So I went back to Martina and I was like, we shouldn't be telling people to make art. They should go for a walk or fold their laundry. Like, I don't have anything out there that points to art making as a doorway into inspiration. And we kept talking about it. And we brought in a dancer and facilitator of movement among every population you can think of, from hospitals to prisons to teenagers to corporate settings. And we just kept agreeing among us. We think that if people who don't normally partake in arts practices, who don't have the arts as part of their lives, tried some simple arts making, it might give them new feedback or new perspective on familiar problems. So I'm basically wanting to prove a piece of my map. That new perspectives hex, that big high level green one, and how it connects down here and recurs in impact on other disciplines. I'm basically saying I want to run some sort of study or something that says that yes, people in a non-arts discipline who make something might gain a new perspective on the thing they're really familiar with. And I don't have the evidence or the research that supports that, so let's just try it. So Martina and Margot and I planned this workshop. We're just going to do it, and we'll collect as much data as we can. we'll structure this. I have a really cool boss. She said, go ahead, try it. Let's see what happens. So we had this workshop, and the premise is, if you have a research, let's say research conundrum, a stuck place that you can't get past, and every time you think about it the same way and nothing changes, that perhaps for people who don't have an arts making practice as part of their daily life, they could consider that stuck place as thematic material, and they could explore it through making. They could make movement about it, they could write poetically about it, they could create visual art about it. And through the process of making and of looking critically at what they've made and looking at its features, what does it have, they might understand a familiar thing differently. They might get a new perspective on their stuff. So that's what we said, we're going to do this. So we did the workshop in person in October on campus at the University of Michigan. We had 15 people attend. They were from clinical and translational medicine, engineering, the Office of Research, physics, the School of Information, neuroscience, education, engineering, law. We had a really nice mix of people. And Margot led the workshop, and I just sat there and took notes, and I had surveys ready, and I was going to do focus groups, and we're going to find out, like, how did this go? What are we seeing? Does it come close to at all what we think it might do? So we refined the claim of the workshop. Not that the arts are going to help you get unstuck. We can't guarantee or talk about an aha, but that the arts seem to be at least somewhat effective at giving you a new perspective, at thinking differently, at those big light green hex properties. So not everyone, but many people in the workshop had these experiences that match that description of what we had hoped for, a new way of thinking. So now, because we like numbers, I'm going to show you my slide with numbers. Hang on. Oops, need to advance. So one of my many survey questions was a yes, no, maybe, or yes, kind of, no. And the ones I'm most interested in are that the fourth question down, I advanced my thinking on something. I came unstuck. So everybody said yes or kind of. So something started to shift, something started to change, at least a little bit. I made something. Through the act of making, through a creative process, I made something that's useful for my thinking. Again, not like a super long green line of yeses, but no nos. Everybody had some kind of experience that was useful to their thinking. And then that bottom question, I thought about familiar things in unfamiliar ways. I wish I'd had no red on there, but there's a lot of green on there. A lot of people said, yes, I thought about familiar things in unfamiliar ways. And so it's not a slam dunk. And as I sat there and watched the participants, I could see hesitance and reticence and some people getting a little squirmy and wishing they could go. So it wasn't perfect, but it was more yeses than nos. It was more people who were engaged and getting sort of won over. Back to the question of expressing impact, here are some descriptive or expressive things about how that went for people. The left-hand one was written, so they had more time to articulate or compose their thoughts, and the right-hand one is from a focus group, so it's someone just speaking off the cuff. So a physics faculty member says, I went in expecting to enjoy the change of pace and find the interactions with new people stimulating, but I was skeptical that the workshop would help me resolve an area where I was stuck in my research. Already having to explain my stuck place to someone with zero background in my field started to steer me away from my long-time framing of the issue as a technical problem. And the following exercises served to solidify this reframing. The workshop allowed me to resolve the problem that I actually had, which is not the one I thought I had. And so by featuring her quote, she had like a gold star experience. She was standing there telling us, I can't believe it. I have been stuck on this research problem and now I know how to go forward. So we just harvested everything we could. Keep talking, tell us more. A little less glowing, but still convincing. An engineering faculty member said, an overarching thing from this experience is just this framework for approaching an issue, which is definitely not the way I usually approach problems, but there's definitely utility to it. It became apparent you step outside and start thinking about it differently. And all of a sudden you start thinking of things you haven't thought before. So I think it's a framework I'm going to try to incorporate more often. So some positive indicators that maybe we're on the right track. Some challenges. We had someone, as I mentioned, from the Office of Research in the workshop. And she said, I can't recommend this. I can't offer this through our professional development arm because there are a lot of senior researchers, especially in the sciences, who aren't going to like it. It's too touchy-feely. They aren't going to like being told that they should move around or make a found object sculpture. And the people from the person who was there from our clinical and translational medicine had the same reaction. She's like, this was great, but I'm afraid that, you know, it's just not going to fly with the population I serve. So we were up against this perception that the arts are touchy-feely, that it's nice if you've got the time, but I'm busy. And several people confessed that they came to the workshop because they know me and they feel collegial, and they were like, sure, I'll give it a try. But had it been just advertised, they wouldn't have made the time for it. That there's not enough of a concrete deliverable. And of course we're going, how much more concrete do you want? People are saying they're seeing things differently. But I see their point. I can sympathize with the arts are nice, but I'm too busy. And at the same time, I personally understand that there's a different sort of rigor in making and in looking at what you've made and remaking it. So that's where we are, almost up until we're up to the present and almost to the future, because this is the workshop we're offering with Michael next Thursday remotely. We haven't done it remotely yet, where we've done it live. We've got it pretty well tinkered so that we know it works with this little screen version. But I would love to hear now from you about this continued effort to sort of test and prove the claim that of this impact, that we can get new perspectives, particularly if you're in a non-arts field or a STEM field. What questions would you ask of a workshop like this, or what would your expectations be? Takahito, you're right there, go for it.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering, I know it was great to know that it was a tipping point for the faculty members, but could you explain the background of faculty members? I know they're from interdisciplinary, but are they emerging scholars or more established scholars?
Oh, that's a good question.
And then another question is, how did you recruit them? Did you send email to the all faculty, or how did you find them, the participant of the workshop? Thank you.
Sure. So to the question of rank, there were 2 grad students there. There were a couple of people who were on administrative side of things. That is, they provide workshops to a population of faculty they serve. And then I'm just mentally going through assistant professor, associate professor. I don't think there was a full professor there. Yeah, arranged, but not all the way up to the top. And how we recruited them was by invitation, because we felt a little, this was a pilot. We didn't know if it was going to work, and we wanted to invite people who were sort of sympathetic and would give us, who were prepared to give us a lot of feedback, who would fill out that survey and stay and talk to us, and be forthcoming in their feedback. So it wasn't advertised widely. We invited people who we said, oh, you know, they'd be willing to do this. They would do us a favor. They would show up and participate and let us know what they thought.
Thank you.
Sure.
There's a question. I know that Sean has his hand up, but Libby had a question in the chat that I don't want to get lost. What was the arts experience in the workshop?
Oh, good question. So there were 3. There was a movement piece that was a little indirect, and we've retooled that. But the pieces that really kind of generated momentum was sort of poetic creative writing. And if you can, I don't know how else to put it, a found object sculpture making. So not sculpting out of clay, but here's a range of objects. Choose the colors, and textures, and the shapes, and make a sculpture out of these found objects. So there was movement, poetic writing, and sort of a visual sculpture assemblage. Did any arts faculty, I'm looking at chat. Oh, but wait, I'm going to get to Diana, but Sean is waiting. Please go ahead, Sean, and then Diana. Sean, you're mute. I don't know if you, nope.
Right.
Yep.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. So sorry for speaking so much. I don't really see myself as an egotistical person, but I'm really excited by what you're talking about.
It's all about you, Sean. Sean.
but I plan on taking a workshop if I can fit it in the schedule and things like that. But as a STEM field, I'm not sure if I'm an artist or engineer, or actually, I don't even know who I am. But the thing is, I'm being asked to create art experiences for engineers. And we're trying to develop research about how to make it, how art is a practical thing to teach other people. And I tripped over something called heuristics, which is the beginning of AI, and how humans think and act and react to complex systems. And I figured that artists are sort of like the scientists of heuristics, how to try new things in ways with incomplete things. And I'm hoping that I can get some more links to understanding that kind of method, like an actual practical method. You can use a heuristic to solve a problem that artists do without even thinking about it. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying there. And it just, I'm kind of hoping that I can find some links to that, even in this crowd or at the workshop.
Does anybody here want to speak to his comment and question or his request? I would temper your search and not be too a heuristic that will get us to solve these problems, because I can't promise solution to problems. I think you get a new approach, you get new ways in. I don't know if you flip understanding, but you certainly transition it in terms of a heuristic. You see it differently, but I don't know if—
Well, in my classes, I teach failure is number one. You know, like I have a hard time, as again, with the administration who wants return on investments and itemize everything and all of that stuff. And I'm sure that we all have that experience. But, you know, again, as part of this research, the process means that it's open-ended. But I'm trying to capture practical things that an engineer would see as, oh, I can actually use that as a tool in my everyday experience. And so, yeah, I'm not trying to deliver a product per se, but I am trying to codify how we can approach problems and all this innovation stuff that I hear about all the time. But like expressly, how do artists and what they do, how can we mimic what they do that makes new ideas come about? And can we have like a sort of map like you had, but like more based on how arts can integrate with all of the departments around here? Do you know what I mean?
I think so. And it's hard to say the arts do X, because of course it's hard to make it a monolith. But when I try to come up with something that the arts do, that they always do, it's make stuff. It's the process of making. And I mean, we all make stuff. We make dinner and we make reports and emails, but it's a making that has a little bit more exploratory and willingness to iterate or try again inherent in it. And I think, at least that's the premise of the workshop, that it's through that making that you find out something different. But I really hope other people will jump in on that, because there are so many smart people in the Zoom room.
Well, we're waiting for people to jump there. We should go back to Diana's comment, right, or question. Did any arts faculty participate in the workshop?
They did not. And my collaborators, Martina and Margot, kept suggesting, and I kept saying, well, no, they do art stuff all the time. Like, this is what they do every day. I want people who don't normally go through this making process to see if it's different for them. And maybe that was a mistake. You know, maybe it would have been good to have, you know, our friends, the musicians and the people from Stamps Art and Design in there. Stamps is the name of the school at University of Michigan. So the answer is no, but maybe that was a misstep. I don't know. Would you have done it, or how? Tell me the question behind the question. If there were, what would have been different?
Oh yeah, sorry, asking me why I asked it. No, I mean, I'm at a very small kind of liberal arts and arts college, so we don't have we don't have science faculty. So I was just wondering, like how it might work in the reverse, or what both sides might get out of it.
Aha. Oh, I almost want to call on her, but I don't want to make her self-conscious. Mary Beth, what might both sides get out of it if we're asking scientists or STEM people to try an arts method? What do arts people get when they learn from scientists? You're the expert.
Yeah, this is a question that we're looking to pursue more as well. I'm Mary Beth Lee, and I'm at University of Alaska Fairbanks, and I coordinate arts humanities integration projects here that are focused on the environment, particularly ecological science. And we see a lot of evidence for what the artists get out of it, in large part due to the way we structure our programs, where the artists really are kind of the learners who are learning from scientists about the scientific process, but also about content. But we're really trying to flip that and make it more bidirectional so that the scientists engage. So I'm really excited about this workshop because I want to test it out and maybe deliver something like that to the scientists. I can attest that scientists are reluctant because they just don't know what they're going to be asked to do, and they think it might be embarrassing or emotional or touchy-feely or something, but when they do, they always love it. So we do some of these things with them in the field, movement activities, a little bit of creative work, but we're just starting to dip our toe in it. But scientists, I echo what a lot of people said, that and engineers can gain creative skills, new insights, and relationships with people that think differently from them, and the ability also to explain things and frame them differently by talking to people that are outside of their normal bubble. I think there are a lot of things that can do to science for science. Of course, what's compelling immediately to scientists is the potential to communicate more effectively to the general audience, and that's compelling to funders and scientists. And I think there's a lot of evidence that that's very successful. But we do want to move beyond that, because I know that gets into the terrain of instrumentalizing the arts as a tool for communication. So just I always try to put it in context that that's just one of many things that art science engagement can do.
And that's why you're so awesome. Paul, I see you with your hand up, but because I'm the boss, I'm just going to comment on one thing Mary Beth said, and then I'm going to let you talk. She was talking about how science people don't want to do it. They don't know what they're going to be asked of them. And I just have to give all credit to excellent facilitators, that Margot is an expert facilitator who can really set people at ease, and they understand that they're not expected to do something high stakes, that it's completely easygoing, and people are set at ease. So please go ahead, Paul.
So I was a trainer briefly for the Alda Center for Communicating Science at Stony Brook University. My friend of mine was a director there, and there was a lot of reluctant scientists. And it was a utilitarian use of the arts. It was theater practices to help improve communication. But I think that provides us an interesting model, because once you open the door, then new collaborations can begin. I know in Northern Illinois, the College of Engineering and my College of Visual and Performing Arts have been working together with students in senior capstone projects, and that's where the two of them come together. So students are seeing it, and then faculty who are collaborating with the students or mentoring also see it, and that seems to inspire some deeper collaborations. And one of the outcomes is that we've dedicated some money directly for interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary activities, and seeing that validity. And when you seed it with some money or some reward, that incentivizes it. But one of the challenges, of course, are personnel subcommittees at the university level are reluctant to recognize transdisciplinary work as legitimate. Unfortunately, we're trying to change that too, right down to our faculty service report. But it's a rough go because it has to go through votes. But anyway, we're trying.
I can't go fast enough, but if you go to a2ru.org, there's a research thing on the top, and there's a category called tenure and promotion, and there's a library there that has a bunch of really great reading. I just gathered it, I didn't write it, about policy that values and recognizes interdisciplinary work. Go ahead, Drew.
Hi, Drew Hook. I'm at the IMRC Center. I work with Sean. I'm at the University of Maine, Orono, a part of the UMaine system, seven schools. I had a question about communicating with students effectively en masse, spreading the word, reaching out. Does anyone have any success stories about reaching students where they are on the devices they use or on the systems they use to are there areas on your campuses that consistently have high attendance? What was done to build that attendance? What was done to build that excitement at the student level? We have a lot of contact with administration and administrators and faculty, and we're building those things. One of the biggest challenges we found is reaching the students consistently where they are.
Emily?
What are you thinking? Cue me up. Sorry.
I'm thinking that you excel at reaching students, that you
Oh,
might have something to
Okay,
offer.
sorry. I didn't know if you had a specific program initiative in mind. Can you
No.
say one more thing as part of that question, as far as reaching students through for like courses or getting excited about things or beyond classroom kind of things? Or
I would say co-curricular activity involvement. So there's a lot of integration happening at the course level in terms of getting courses using facility resources here on campus. Some of our arts facility, the IMRC Center has a lot of resources for courses that are already happening that are looking for 3D printing or lasers or a theater space or computer lab resources, that sort of thing. It's a lot going on here, and there's a lot of opportunities for faculty to get involved with resources they may not have had. However, co-curricular activities for the students after class or workshops, or we're just getting started getting some student clubs in the door that just have their meetings in the building, for example, things like that. I'm wondering if there are other success stories as we build. We don't want to do something unorganically because we want to scale up our support for those things as we gain more involvement. But the question is, are there some success stories for some of those co-curricular activities, and what was, or maybe what to avoid even?
yeah, so just saying, I haven't, I guess, spoken to where I'm positioned at the university. So I work in this space called the Commons, which is primarily an event space. And so I work with students, though I'm not an instructor. So I think a lot of the successes that we've had with bringing students together entirely beyond the classroom in this case have to do with figuring out ways to help them find others across disciplines, because they aren't naturally wired to only want to talk to people who think like them. That's sort of a thing that the university forces upon us in a lot of ways. But we've had a lot of success by taking events off campus, actually, and students attending, like turning the local theater downtown into occasionally a poetry reading night or something like that. And it becomes kind of a fun event for them. And they, a few of them will get to go to dinner with the speaker, that kind of thing. So just thinking, I know that requires some funding to have a lecture fund or something like that, but having students kind of have some say in who are doing those keynote addresses. Through employing students, I think that's been another way that's been really helpful, to hear what they're interested in and what they're wanting, rather than assuming I might know, or the strategic plan that I'm trying to acknowledge in all of my motions knows the best thing to. I guess one other thing too has been, like, students seem to love being outside. So having ways for them to, there's a garden adjacent to the building that I work in, and having ways for them to have opportunities to gather out there, whether it's for events or for them to come up with a project. It's like getting to plant in the space and come up with reasons for why. I think my sense is that they're very hungry for opportunities that are less sort of static than a lot of standard classroom kind of style of things, which I suppose this community is probably already thinking about with a lot of the arts engagement. But does that help at all?
Certainly. Thank you very much.
And if there are other responses for Drew, you should probably drop them in the chat before we close out. I'm seeing people dropping off one by one with other commitments, and we did promise until 3:30. So I think it's probably important that everybody have a chance to stand up and walk around before their next Zoom thing. And Michael, how would you like to close this out?
Well, there was one comment from Dever that I'll read, and then you can react to it if you'd like, and then maybe at that point we should call it a colloquium. What do you think? From Dever, yeah, I think engagement and the personal touch of seeing and reaching them as much as possible beyond emails, visiting classes, overlap with related student organizations, and so forth.
Oh, yeah. Here's to seeing them and touching them. Like I was really hopeful that we could all be together. And I get that this allows us to be together, even though we're geographically disparate, but there is a lot of value to being in a room with other people and actually being there. But this has its advantages because we all got to be together in this way. Having food goes a long way too. That is of the session. Listen, I'm so grateful to Michael for inviting me and to all of you for showing up and participating. It would have been no fun if I had just talked and talked. So thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for coming. We're really grateful for your time today. And if you have time next Thursday, please consider registering for the masterclass and experience your understanding flipping. I'm excited about it.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.